I'm Melissa Anderson, 27 years old, and I spent my entire life trying to be the perfect daughter and sister, only to end up as my family's eternal scapegoat. Growing up in Portland, I never imagined that one day I'd walk away from everything. I knew. That family gathering last spring changed everything. Their angry faces, pointing fingers, and those devastating words that still echo in my mind. You ruined our lives. Get out. So I did exactly that. I quietly left and cut them all off. The 50-plus missed calls a month later, that's where this story gets interesting. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. My earliest memories of family life were sprinkled with little moments of blame that seemed innocent enough at first. I grew up in a modest two-story home in the suburbs of Portland, with my parents, Richard and Karen Anderson, my older brother, Tyler, and younger sister Rachel. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect American family. Dad ran a small but successful furniture store. Mom worked part-time as a receptionist at a dentist's office, and us kids were always involved, in some activity or another. But inside our home, a pattern started early. When I was 5, Tyler accidentally knocked over Mom's favorite crystal vase while roughhousing with Rachel. The sound of shattering glass brought everyone running, and without missing a beat, Tyler said, "Melissa did it!" Even though I was coloring. In the kitchen at the time, my parents believed him. That was the first time I remember feeling that strange, hollow ache of being blamed for something I didn't do. As years passed, the pattern only grew stronger. If grades slipped, it was because Melissa distracts everyone with her music. If the family budget was tight one month, somehow my dance lessons were singled out as the problem, even though Tyler's football equipment cost twice as much. When Dad had a bad day at work, I learned to make myself scarce because any little thing I did would trigger his temper. "You always have to make everything about you, don't you?" became my mother's favorite phrase whenever I tried to defend myself. The hurt would well up inside me, but I would swallow it down, determined to prove my worth. I threw myself into academics, thinking achievements might change how they saw me. By high school, I was maintaining a 4.0 GPA, serving as class president, and volunteering on weekends. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Jenkins, was the first adult who seemed to truly see me. "Melissa, you have such a bright future ahead," she told me during my junior year. "Stanford would be lucky to have you." When I excitedly shared this with my family over dinner, my father scoffed. "Don't get your hopes up. We can't afford fancy schools, especially with Tyler's college fund already stretched thin." "But I could get scholarships," I replied, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "Always dreaming too big," my mother sighed. "Maybe consider something more realistic." Rachel rolled her eyes across the table. Drama queen. That night, I cried silently into my pillow, a practice I'd perfected over the years. Despite their lack of support, I did get into Stanford with a substantial scholarship. The night I received my acceptance letter, I found my parents and siblings huddled in the living room, expressions grim. "What's wrong?" I asked, the letter clutched behind my back. "Your brother didn't get into his first choice school," my mother explained, arm around Tyler. "We're trying to figure out what to do now." I slowly tucked the Stanford letter into my back pocket. That wasn't the right time. It never seemed to be the right time for my achievements. When I finally told them, 3 days later, my father's first response was, "How much is this going to cost us?" Not congratulations, not pride, just concern about money, despite the scholarship I'd worked so hard for. At Stanford, I blossomed away from my family's shadow. I made real friends for the first time. People like Amber Williams and Jasmine Chen, who valued my opinions and didn't blame me when things went wrong. The distance should have helped my relationship with my family, but phone calls home always left me anxious. Somehow, even from hundreds of miles away, I was still blamed for things. Ever since you left, your sister's grades have dropped. My mother informed me during my sophomore year. She misses you, even though she won't admit it. The implication was clear. Rachel's academic problems were somehow my fault for pursuing my own education. After graduation, despite job offers in California, I moved back to Portland. Part of me still desperately wanted my family's approval, still believed I could change the dynamic if I just tried hard enough. I found a position at a growing marketing firm, rented a small apartment about 20 minutes from my parents' house, and resumed the role of dutiful daughter with weekly family dinners. Marketing, my father had scoffed when I told him about my job. So basically, you trick people into buying things they don't need. I tried once, in a moment of courage at 24, to address the scapegoating directly. We were having Sunday dinner, and I'd just been blamed for my mother forgetting to buy ingredients for dessert, somehow because I'd called earlier to confirm what time I should arrive. "I've noticed something," I said carefully, setting down my fork. "It seems like whenever something goes wrong, I get blamed for it, even when I have nothing to do with it." The silence that followed was deafening. "Are you serious right now?" Rachel finally said. "You're so self-centered." "Always the victim," Tyler added with a smirk. My father's face darkened. "After everything we've done for you, this is the thanks we get? Accusations?" My mother simply looked disappointed. "Melissa, I thought you'd outgrown this attention-seeking behavior. I never brought it up again." By 27, I'd been promoted to senior marketing strategist at my firm. After years of therapy with Dr. Miles, I was slowly building boundaries with my family while maintaining the relationship. I limited dinners to twice a month. I learned to end phone calls when they turned toxic. Small steps toward self-preservation. The promotion should have been a moment of pure celebration. My boss, Veronica Patterson, had praised my creative campaigns and client retention rate. There was a substantial raise, more creative control, and the possibility of heading up a new branch office in Seattle. I was ecstatic but apprehensive about telling my family. As expected, the news wasn't received well at our next dinner. "So you're abandoning the family business when we need you most?" my father asked, his voice laced with disappointment. "Dad, I've never worked at the furniture store," I reminded him gently. "But your marketing skills could save us right now," my mother interjected. "Sales have been dropping for months, and just like that, my promotion wasn't an achievement to celebrate, but a selfish act that hurt the family." The familiar weight of unearned guilt settled on my shoulders as I drove home that night, wondering why I kept subjecting myself to this treatment while simultaneously unable to imagine cutting ties completely. Little did I know, circumstances were about to force my hand in ways I never could have anticipated. Anderson Furniture had been a Portland fixture for nearly 30 years. My grandfather started it, my father expanded it, and it was always assumed that Tyler would eventually take over. The store specialized in hand-finished wood furniture, a niche market that had been profitable but was increasingly challenged by big-box stores and online retailers. When my father mentioned declining sales during my promotion dinner, I offered to help. Not because I felt obligated, but because despite everything, I loved my family and wanted them to succeed. "I could update your website and run some targeted ad campaigns," I suggested during a follow-up visit. "Free of charge, of course." My father's shoulders relaxed slightly. "That would be helpful, Melissa." For the next few months, I spent my evenings and weekends working on the family business. I built them a beautiful new website with an online store, created social media accounts, and designed digital marketing campaigns targeting specific customer demographics. I even arranged for professional photos of their furniture pieces. Sales began to improve slightly, but not enough to offset what I later discovered was a much bigger problem. During a rare moment of vulnerability, my mother confided that the business had taken out a substantial loan 2 years prior to renovate the showroom and warehouse. The monthly payments are killing us, she admitted over coffee one Sunday afternoon. Your father hasn't been sleeping. Maybe I can help look over the finances, I offered. I deal with budgets at work all the time. The look of relief on my mother's face should have been a warning sign. Would you? That would be such a weight off our shoulders. What I found in the company books shocked me. The renovation loan was just the tip of the iceberg. There were multiple high-interest loans, maxed-out credit lines, and a cash flow problem that no amount of marketing could solve. The business needed serious financial restructuring. When I presented my findings to my parents, my father grew defensive. So, now you're a financial expert too? He snapped. I've been running this business since before you were born. I'm just trying to help, Dad, I said calmly. Based on these numbers, you might want to consider downsizing the warehouse space or possibly selling some inventory at a discount to improve cash flow. Absolutely not, he responded, face flushing with anger. That furniture represents our family legacy. Despite his resistance, the situation grew dire enough that my parents eventually took some of my advice. They listed part of the warehouse for rent and ran a modest sale. They also applied for a refinancing loan, which is where things took a complicated turn. Due to my father's already overextended credit, the bank required additional guarantors for the loan. Tyler was still carrying student debt from his business degree, and Rachel had recently bought a house with her husband Justin. That left me with my excellent credit score and stable income as the logical choice. It's just a formality, my father assured me when he asked me to co-sign. The business will cover all the payments. You won't have to pay a dime. I hesitated. Every financial expert would advise against co-signing a loan for a struggling business, even a family one. But the alternative was watching my family lose everything they'd built. Let me think about it, I said. That night I called Dr. Miles for an emergency therapy session. You know my professional advice would be against this, she said after I explained the situation. But I also understand the emotional complexity here. If you do decide to help, make sure you get everything in writing and have a clear exit strategy. After a sleepless night, I agreed to co-sign the loan with written conditions. I would have visibility into the business accounts. Any major financial decisions would require my approval, and we would have monthly meetings to review progress. My father reluctantly agreed, though I could tell he found my conditions insulting. The loan was approved, and for a brief period things improved. The refinanced debt had lower monthly payments, and my marketing efforts were slowly building a customer base beyond their traditional clientele. 3 months in, I noticed some concerning transactions in the business account. Large cash withdrawals. With no corresponding vendor payments or inventory purchases, when I brought this up during our monthly meeting, my father became evasive. Those are personal draws, he said dismissively. Standard practice for business owners. The amounts seem excessive given the company's situation, I pushed back gently. Almost $4,000 last week alone. Are you monitoring my personal spending now? He demanded, voice rising. This is still my business, Melissa. My mother intervened, as she always did when tensions rose. Your father knows what he's doing, sweetheart. Let's move on to more positive topics. I should have pushed harder. I should have recognized the red flags. But decades of family conditioning had taught me to back down, to trust their judgment over my own, to accept blame rather than assign it. 2 weeks later, I received a frantic call from my mother. The business checking account was nearly empty. A major vendor payment had bounced, and my father was unreachable. I rushed to their house to find my mother pale and shaking at the kitchen table. Tyler and Rachel were already there, their expressions a mix of anger and concern. Where's Dad? I asked. Gambling. Tyler spat out the word like poison. Apparently he's been hitting the casino for months. His bookie just showed up here looking for him. Bookie? I echoed, trying to process this new information. I didn't know he bet on sports, too. There's a lot you don't know, Rachel said, accusingly. You've been so wrapped up in your perfect life. I bit back a defensive response. This wasn't the time. The next few days were a blur of crisis management. My father returned, shame-faced and defeated. The business bank account was, indeed, empty. Over $100,000 had been gambled away in the past 6 months alone, including much of the refinancing loan I had co-signed. I coordinated emergency meetings with their accountant and the bank, trying to salvage what we could. My father agreed to seek help for his gambling addiction, though his agreement felt more like capitulation than commitment. Family dinners became tense affairs, with undercurrents of blame circulating like electric currents. Though no one said it directly, I could feel the accusation. If I had been more involved, if I had monitored things more closely, if I had recognized the signs sooner. One evening, after a particularly strained family meeting about selling off inventory, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Family meeting tomorrow night at 6. Everyone will be there. Very important you come. No excuses. The formal tone was unusual for my mother. Typically, her texts included at least one endearment and several emojis. This felt different. Ominous. Is everything okay? I texted back. Just be there, came the reply. As I drove home that night, a sense of foreboding settled over me. Something had shifted in the family dynamic, and instinctively, I knew I wasn't going to like what came next. The next evening, I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 6 o'clock. My stomach had been in knots all day, a physical manifestation of anxiety I'd come to recognize from years of family tension. I'd even considered canceling my therapy appointment that afternoon to prepare mentally, but Dr. Miles had talked me through breathing exercises and boundary-setting strategies that I hoped would help me navigate whatever was coming. What I didn't expect was the number of cars already parked along the street. I recognized Tyler's pickup truck and Rachel's minivan, but also my grandfather's ancient Buick, my Aunt Patricia's SUV, and several other vehicles belonging to extended family members. What on earth? I muttered to myself as I collected my purse and the folder of financial documents I'd brought just in case. This wasn't just a family meeting. This was something much bigger. The front door was unlocked, and the moment I stepped inside, the buzz of conversation abruptly stopped. I walked into the living room to find it packed with people. My parents sat side by side on the sofa, expressions grim. Tyler and Rachel flanked them like sentries. My grandparents, 2 aunts, an uncle, and several cousins occupied every other available seat. All eyes turned to me. There she is, my father said, his voice oddly flat. Now we can begin. Begin what exactly? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as I remained standing near the doorway. What's going on? My mother couldn't meet my eyes. We need to discuss the family situation, Melissa. The family situation that you created, Tyler added sharply. I blinked in confusion. I'm sorry? Don't play innocent, Rachel snapped. We know what you did. My grandfather, normally the gentlest person in our family, looked at me with disappointment. I never thought one of my own grandchildren would destroy what took generations to build. The sense of being ambushed was overwhelming. I clutched the folder of documents tighter, as if it might shield me from what was happening. I genuinely have no idea what you're talking about, I said, my voice smaller than I intended. My father stood up then, face flushed with anger. The website, Melissa, the marketing campaigns, the help you so generously offered. What about them? They destroyed our business, he shouted, making me flinch. You drove away our loyal customers with your modern nonsense. 30 years of reputation ruined because you had to show off your fancy marketing skills. I struggled to make sense of this accusation. Dad, the online sales have been increasing every month. The data shows that. Data, he scoffed. Our regular customers stopped coming in. They said the store didn't feel like their place anymore after your changes. My Aunt Patricia nodded vigorously. My bridge club used to shop there exclusively. Now they go to Furniture Pavilion instead. They said your website made Anderson's look too expensive. This was the first I'd heard of any customer complaints. Why didn't anyone tell me this was happening? We could have adjusted the marketing approach. We shouldn't have had to tell you, my mother interjected. You're supposed to be the expert. The accusations continued, each family member adding to the growing pile of blame. The website had attracted the wrong kind of customers. The social media posts weren't traditional enough. My suggestion to offer some more modern pieces alongside their classic designs had diluted the brand. I tried to defend myself with facts. The sales reports showed overall growth. The customer demographics had expanded, not contracted. The profit margins on the new items were actually higher than on the traditional pieces. But no one was listening. Each time I opened my mouth, someone would talk over me, dismiss me, or twist my words. Then came the financial accusations. You advised us to take out that refinancing loan, my father said, conveniently forgetting that it had been his idea from the start. Now we're deeper in debt than ever. You were already in debt because of the gambling, I reminded him, immediately regretting bringing up this painful point. The room went deadly silent for a moment. How dare you, my mother whispered. Your father is struggling with an addiction, and you throw it in his face? After everything we've done for you? I'm not throwing anything in anyone's face, I said, fighting to keep my composure. I'm just trying to establish the timeline accurately. Always with the excuses, Tyler said with disgust, always finding someone else to blame. The irony was, so thick I could barely breathe. What about the loan conditions? Rachel added. Dad couldn't make a single business decision without your approval. You basically handcuffed him. Those conditions were to protect everyone involved, including me as a co-signer, I explained, opening the folder to find the agreement we'd all signed. Dad agreed to these terms. Under duress, my father shouted. What choice did I have? The business was struggling, and you held your precious credit score over my head. I looked around the room, seeking one sympathetic face and finding none. Even my grandmother, who used to slip me extra cookies when no one was looking, sat with lips pursed in disapproval. The accusations kept coming, expanding beyond the business failures to encompass apparently every family problem of the past decade. My moving to college had broken the family apart. My constant criticism had worn down my father's confidence. My selfish career ambitions had deprived the family business of my marketing skills until it was too late. I remembered Dr. Sao, Miles's advice about setting boundaries. I understand you're all upset, but these accusations aren't fair or accurate. I tried my best to help while maintaining my own career. Your best? My father laughed bitterly. Your best has ruined us. The bank is threatening foreclosure on the business loan, which means your mother and I could lose our house. My heart sank. The house is collateral? Of course it is, Tyler said. Not that you'd care. You're probably loving this, seeing us all fail while you succeed. That's not true, I protested, tears finally breaking through my composure. You're my family. I love you. I want to help. We don't need your kind of help, my father said coldly. Standing up, he pointed toward the door. You've done enough. You ruined our lives, Melissa. Get out, and don't come back. The words hit like physical blows. I looked to my mother. Surely. She would defend me? But she stared at her hands, silent. Mom? I whispered. I think it's best if you go, she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. I looked around the room one last time, at the faces of the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, people I'd spent my entire life trying to please, people who had always found me wanting. A strange calm settled over me then, a clarity I'd never experienced before. Without another word, I placed the folder of documents on the coffee table turned around, and walked out the door. No one called after me. No one followed. As I drove away from my childhood home, tears streaming down my face, I had no idea that this moment of utter devastation would actually become the first step toward my liberation. The drive home from my parents' house that night remains a blur in my memory. Somehow I navigated the familiar streets on autopilot, tears making the traffic lights blur into halos of color. By the time I reached my apartment, my hands were shaking. So badly I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock the door. Inside, I collapsed onto my couch, the weight of what had just happened crushing down on me. My entire family, extended relatives included, had unanimously declared me the villain of their collective story, the architect of their downfall, the person who had ruined everything. "You ruined our lives, get out!" My father's words echoed, in my mind, each repetition like a dagger. Sleep was impossible that night. I paced my small apartment, replaying not just the confrontation, but every memory I could summon from childhood to present. The pattern was so clear now, so glaringly obvious, that I couldn't understand how I'd missed it for 27 years. Or perhaps I hadn't missed it at all. Perhaps I'd simply accepted it as my due, internalized the idea that somehow I deserved to be the family scapegoat. I remembered my 10th birthday party, canceled because Tyler had a football game the same day. "Why do you always have to make everything about you?" my mother had asked when I cried. As if my wish to celebrate my birthday on my actual birthday was selfishness incarnate. I remembered my high school graduation, how my family had arrived late and left early because Rachel wasn't feeling well. They missed my valedictorian speech entirely, then complained on the drive home about the wasted afternoon, when I'd been just one of hundreds of students. I remembered Christmas 2 years ago, when I'd spent weeks selecting thoughtful gifts for everyone, only to receive a generic grocery store gift card that still had the activation receipt attached, showing it had been purchased that morning. When I'd tried to hide my disappointment, Tyler had accused me of being ungrateful and impossible to please. As dawn broke, I found myself at my small dining table with a notebook, methodically documenting every instance I could recall when I'd been unfairly blamed or scapegoated. The list stretched to 4 pages, front and back, and these were just the incidents significant enough to stand out in memory. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full magnitude of the injustice. Not just disappointment or hurt, but genuine anger. Anger at my family for their treatment of me. Anger at myself for accepting it for so long. And beneath the anger, something else was stirring. A sense of possibility. A question I'd never dared ask before. What if I just left? Not just physically walked away as I had last night, but truly extricated myself from this toxic family system. Cut contact. Started fresh. Built a life where I wasn't perpetually crouching in anticipation of the next unfair accusation. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. I called my boss, Veronica, and requested a week of emergency vacation, citing a family crisis. True enough. "Take the time you need," she said, concern evident in her voice. "And Melissa? That Seattle position is still on the table if you're interested. We could fast-track the transfer." My heart skipped a beat. "I might be. Can I let you know by the end of the week?" "Absolutely. Take care of yourself." I spent that day in a strange, focused daze, researching what it would take to uproot my life. I called my landlord to inquire about breaking my lease, 1 month's additional rent as penalty, researched apartments in Seattle, more expensive but not prohibitively so, and calculated my savings, enough to cushion the transition. The most difficult decision was regarding my phone number, which my family had used to contact me my entire adult life. Changing it felt like a drastic step, a severing of connections. But as I scrolled through recent text exchanges with my parents and siblings, seeing the pattern of guilt trips, demands, and subtle put-downs, I knew it was necessary. I visited my bank to ensure my accounts were secure and solely in my name. I gathered important documents: birth certificate, social security card, passport, advanced degrees, and placed them in a fireproof lockbox. I made lists of what to pack, what to sell, what to donate. Through it all, a voice in the back of my mind kept asking if I was overreacting, if I was making a colossal mistake, if family, however dysfunctional, was still family and therefore worth preserving at all costs. To quiet that voice, I scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Miles. "What you're describing is a classic scapegoating dynamic," she confirmed after I'd related the confrontation and its aftermath. "Your family has collectively decided that you're responsible for their problems, which allows them to avoid taking responsibility themselves." "So I'm not crazy? I'm not overreacting?" She shook her head firmly. "No, Melissa. Based on everything you've shared over our years of therapy, this pattern is deeply entrenched. The unified front you encountered suggests they're deeply invested in maintaining it." "What should I do?" I asked, surprising myself with how much I wanted external validation for the plan already forming in my mind. "I can't tell you what to do," she replied gently, "but I can ask what you want, not what you think you should want, or what your family wants you to want. What do you, Melissa Anderson, truly want for your life?" The answer came with unexpected clarity. "Peace. I want peace." The rest of the week passed in a whirlwind of activity. I arranged with my company to transfer to the Seattle office, effective immediately. I sold most of my furniture to a college student moving into her first apartment. I donated clothes and books I no longer needed. I packed my car with the remainder of my possessions, surprising myself with how little I actually wanted to take into my new life. On my final night in Portland, I sat at my now empty dining table and wrote a letter. Not a lengthy explanation or accusation, just a simple statement. "I've accepted that in your minds, I will always be to blame for everything that goes wrong. I can't change that perception, but I can remove myself from it. Please don't try to contact me. I wish you all well in finding whatever it is you're looking for. Melissa." I addressed an envelope to my parents' house but included no return address or indication of where I was going. After a moment's hesitation, I added a second sheet of paper with Dr. Miles's contact information, in case any of them ever genuinely wanted to understand the family dynamic from a professional perspective. I doubted they would use it, but it felt important to leave that door slightly ajar. The following morning, I mailed the letter, turned in my apartment keys, and loaded the last few items into my car. As I drove north toward Seattle and away from the only home I'd ever known, I felt a complicated mixture of grief, fear, and something that took me several miles to identify: relief. For the first time in 27 years, I was free from the expectation of being the perfect scapegoat, free from the burden of absorbing my family's displaced blame, free to discover who Melissa Anderson might become when not constrained by the role she'd been assigned since childhood. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was necessary. And as the "Welcome to Washington" sign appeared on the horizon, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't experienced in a very long time: hope. Seattle greeted me with rain, which felt appropriate somehow. As I drove through unfamiliar streets with my windshield wipers keeping time, the reality of what I'd done began to sink in. I had no family to call, no friends in this new city, just a job transfer and a temporary Airbnb booking for the next 2 weeks while I searched for a permanent place. The Airbnb was a small studio in Capitol Hill, sparsely furnished but clean. After unloading my few possessions, I sat on the edge of the bed and experienced my first moment of doubt. Had I overreacted? Was cutting off all contact too extreme? I reached for my phone instinctively, then remembered I'd already changed my number. There was no going back, at least not easily. The finality of that thought sent me into a panic attack, my first in years. For 20 minutes, I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, struggling to breathe, convinced I'd made a terrible mistake. When the attack finally subsided, I did what I always did in moments of crisis. I made a plan. First priority was setting up my remote work arrangement until the Seattle office was ready for me. Second was finding an apartment. Third was establishing a routine, something to anchor me in this new reality. The next morning, I woke early and walked to a nearby coffee shop with my laptop. The barista, a woman with a sleeve of colorful tattoos and a kind smile, noticed me struggling with the Wi-Fi password. "First time here?" she asked, coming around the counter to help. "First time in Seattle, actually," I admitted. "Welcome. I'm Sophia, by the way." "Melissa." "Well, Melissa, any friend of Cafe Vita is a friend of mine. What brings you to our rainy city?" I hesitated, unsure how to answer without revealing too much to a stranger. "Work transfer. Fresh start." Sophia nodded as if this explained everything. "Best place for it. Seattle's full of transplants reinventing themselves. That's simple." Interaction, barely 5 minutes long, became my first connection in my new city. I returned to the same coffee shop each morning, and Sophia always greeted me by name, eventually introducing me to her partner, Adam, and their friend group that gathered there on weekend mornings. My remote work arrangement with the marketing firm went smoothly. Veronica arranged weekly video conferences to keep me connected to the team, and the Seattle office renovation was proceeding on schedule for a formal opening in 3 months. Finding an apartment proved more challenging. Seattle's rental market was competitive, and without local references, I faced skepticism from several property managers. After 2 weeks of searching, I finally found a small one-bedroom in a converted industrial building in Ballard. The exposed brick walls and large windows sold me immediately, despite the slightly higher-than-planned rent. Moving in with my minimal possessions highlighted how much I'd left behind. My previous apartment had been filled with furniture and decorations chosen to please my family during their infrequent visits. This new space was a blank canvas, waiting for me to define it on my terms alone. I found this simultaneously liberating and paralyzing. Standing in an empty home goods store, I couldn't decide on something as simple as what color towels to buy. For so long, I'd suppressed my own preferences to avoid criticism. What did I actually like? What represented me? These questions extended beyond home decor into every aspect of my life. What foods did I enjoy when not cooking to please others? What music did I prefer when not worried about being judged for my taste? What hobbies had I always wanted to try, but didn't because they wouldn't earn family approval? Dr. Miles and I continued our therapy sessions via video call, now focusing on what she called rediscovering your authentic self. "Think of it as an expedition," she suggested. "You're exploring the landscape of your own preferences and desires. There are no wrong answers, just discoveries." So I began experimenting. I tried new foods, discovering a love for spicy Thai cuisine that my family would have found too exotic. I downloaded music my brother would have mocked as pretentious, finding comfort in classical piano and joy in indie folk. I signed up for a pottery class, something my father once dismissed as playing with mud. The first time I created a lopsided, imperfect bowl in that class, I felt a surge of pride so pure it brought tears to my eyes. Not because the bowl was impressive, it certainly wasn't, but because I'd made it solely for myself, without fear of criticism. My neighbor in the apartment building, an older woman named Diana Rodriguez, noticed me carrying my pottery attempts up the stairs one evening and asked about them. When I explained my new hobby, she invited me in for tea and showed me her own artistic pursuits, intricate embroidery that she'd been creating for decades. "Art saves us," she told me, her hands gently tracing a pattern of birds in flight. "It gives us somewhere to put the feelings that have no words." Diana became another unexpected connection. dropping by with homemade empanadas and stories about her life as a teacher before retirement. She never asked prying questions about my family or why I'd moved to Seattle alone, seeming to intuitively understand my need for space around certain topics. But not all moments in this new life were positive. Guilt and doubt would ambush me at unexpected times. I'd see a mother and daughter shopping together and feel a stab of loss. Father's Day advertisements would trigger memories of trying so hard to find the perfect gift, only to have my selection criticized as impractical or not really my thing. The nightmares were the worst. I'd dream of being back in that living room, surrounded by accusing faces, but in the dreams I couldn't move or speak to defend myself. I'd wake gasping, my sheets tangled and damp with sweat. During one particularly difficult week, 3 months after my move, I almost broke my resolution. I'd received a performance review at work that mentioned areas for improvement. Nothing severe or unexpected, but it triggered all my old insecurities. That night, I found myself looking up flights to Portland, my finger hovering over the purchase button. What stopped me was a text from Sophia. "Poetry slam at Cafe Racer tonight. You in? No pressure, but it might be fun." Such a small thing, this casual invitation. But it reminded me that I was building connections here, that going backward would mean sacrificing the fragile new life I was cultivating. I declined the flights and went to the poetry slam instead, where I sat in the back, nursing a single beer and listening to people pour their hearts out on stage. One woman performed a piece about leaving an abusive relationship that resonated so deeply I had to step outside afterward to compose myself. She followed me out. "First time here?" she asked, offering a cigarette, which I declined. "Is it that obvious?" she smiled. "I saw your face during my poem. Hit close to home?" "Something like that," I admitted. "I'm Jessica. Melissa." We ended up talking until the venue closed, sharing experiences of extracting ourselves from situations where we were undervalued and blamed. Though Jessica's story involved a romantic partner rather than family, the dynamics were strikingly similar. "The hardest part," she told me, "is stopping yourself from going back. There's this pull, like gravity, trying to drag you back into their orbit." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Does it ever get easier?" "Every day," she said. "Each morning you wake up and choose yourself is a victory. Eventually, those victories stack up until they outweigh the pull." As spring turned to summer, those victories indeed began to accumulate. I started joining Sophia's friend group for hikes in the surrounding mountains. I took weekend road trips to explore the Washington coast. I volunteered at a local animal shelter, finding comfort in the unconditional affection of the dogs and cats awaiting adoption. The formal opening of our Seattle office marked another milestone. Veronica flew in for the event, and after the official ceremonies, she pulled me aside. "You seem different," she observed. "More confident." "Do I?" "Definitely. Seattle agrees with you." She studied me for a moment. "Whatever you left behind in Portland, I'm glad you did." I didn't correct her assumption that it was a what, rather than a who I'd left behind. But her observation confirmed what I'd begun to feel myself. I was changing, growing in ways that would have been impossible within the confines of my family's expectations. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror and really saw the person, looking back. The constant tension in my shoulders had eased. The perpetual crease between my brows had softened. My eyes held a clarity that had been absent before. "Hello, Melissa," I whispered to my reflection. "Nice to finally meet you, Raquel." The first time since arriving in Seattle, I slept through the night without nightmares. Exactly 1 month after leaving Portland, I finally felt settled enough in my new life to get a new phone. My temporary burner phone had served its purpose, allowing essential communications without creating a path for my family to reach me. Now, with a permanent address and growing stability, I was ready to reclaim this aspect of modern life. The salesperson at the phone store was explaining the features of the latest model when I interrupted with a question. Would it be possible to check if there are any missed calls or messages on my old number before I fully disconnect it? He looked uncertain. That's unusual, but I think we can probably do that. You'd need to verify your identity, of course. An hour later, with the proper paperwork completed, I sat in the store's back room, staring at a computer screen displaying the activity on my old number. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the list. 53 missed calls, 26 voicemails, 89 text messages, all from my family, starting the day after the confrontation and continuing with increasing frequency. The most recent had come just yesterday. Would you like to listen to the voicemails? The technician asked. I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. The first few messages were angry. My father demanding I stop this childish behavior and call home immediately. My mother's voice, tight with restrained fury, saying I was making everything worse by disappearing. Tyler calling me selfish and dramatic. But as the weeks progressed, the tone changed. Confusion replaced anger. Where was I? Why wasn't I at my apartment? Had I really left Portland? My mother's voice grew tearful, expressing worry while still maintaining I was punishing the family unfairly. The final messages from the past week were different again. My father, voice subdued, asking me to call. We need to talk about the business. Things have developed. My mother, openly crying, saying she missed me and wanted to know I was safe. Even Rachel, who had rarely contacted me directly before, left a message. It's bad, Melissa. Whatever you're mad about, this is bigger. Please call. I sat in stunned silence when the last message finished playing. Would you like the text messages printed out? The technician asked. Yes, please, I managed to say. Reading through the texts revealed a similar progression from anger to worry to something approaching desperation. The most recent text from Tyler simply said, Dad's been arrested. Please, sis, we need you. Arrested? My head spun with questions and conflicting emotions. Part of me, the part that had spent years as the family scapegoat, felt a vindictive satisfaction. Another part, the daughter who despite everything still loved her father, felt concern and confusion. I left the phone store with my new phone, the printouts of texts, and a storm of emotions I couldn't quite sort through. Back in my apartment, I spread the papers across my kitchen counter, trying to piece together what had happened in my absence. The texts contained references to bank investigations, fraud charges, and asset seizure, but no clear explanation of what exactly had occurred. I was tempted to call, to finally break my silence, but something held me back. The memory of that living room full of accusers was still too raw. Instead, I did something I'd avoided for months. I logged into social media. I deactivated my accounts when I left, part of my clean break, but I hadn't deleted them entirely. My feed loaded with a month's worth of updates, including several public posts from my family members that filled in the gaps. The furniture store had failed completely, closing its doors 3 weeks after I left. My father was indeed facing criminal charges, not just for gambling away business funds, but apparently for submitting fraudulent information on multiple loan applications over the years. A post from Rachel included a bitter comment about the bank taking everything because someone co-signed a loan then abandoned us, a transparent attempt to shift blame onto me again. But the comment section told a different story, with several former employees and family friends pointing out that the business had been in trouble long before the final loan, and that my father's gambling had been an open secret in certain circles for years. I closed the laptop, overwhelmed. The narrative my family had constructed, the one where I was responsible for everything, had publicly unraveled. The truth was exposed for anyone to see. This should have felt like vindication, but instead, I felt hollow. Dr. Miles's words from Our most recent session echoed in my mind. Vindication rarely feels the way we expect it to. I was still processing this information the next day when my work phone rang with an unfamiliar Portland number. Melissa Anderson, I answered professionally. Finally. Rachel's voice came through. Do you know how many marketing firms I've called trying to find you? My pulse quickened. How did you get this number? It doesn't matter. You need to come home right now. Dad's case goes to court next week, and the lawyer says we need character witnesses. Plus, the bank is asking questions about that loan you co-signed. No hello? No how are you? No apology. Just demands and implicit accusations. Rachel, I said carefully, I'm not coming back to Portland. What? Of course you are. This is family. The same family that told me I ruined their lives. And to get out? There was a pause. That was just Dad being upset. You know how he gets. I do know. I've always known. That's why I left. So you're just abandoning us when things get hard? Real mature, Melissa. The familiar pattern of blame threatened to pull me back in, but I held firm. I didn't create this situation, Rachel. Dad's gambling and financial decisions did. I'm sorry he's in trouble, but I can't fix this. You're part of this whether you like it or not, she pressed. Your name is on that loan. A loan that I advised against, that I put conditions on specifically to prevent misuse, conditions that were ignored. I've already spoken to a lawyer, of my own, about that situation. Another pause, longer this time. You got a lawyer? Yes, to protect myself. The bank already has my statement regarding the circumstances of the loan and my father's concealment of his gambling addiction. So you're testifying against Dad? Her voice rose in disbelief. I'm telling the truth, Rachel. Something our family has never been very good at. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Rachel cycling through familiar tactics: guilt, accusations, emotional manipulation. When none of these worked, she finally resorted to threats. Fine, stay away if that's what you want. But don't think you can just start over with a clean slate. We know where you work now. Don't be surprised if your boss gets some interesting information about her new employee. A chill ran through me. Are you threatening me? I'm just saying. Actions have consequences. You turned your back on family. That means you're not protected anymore. After the call ended, I sat at my desk shaking. The old Melissa would have panicked, would have capitulated to prevent whatever vague harm Rachel was threatening. But the person I was becoming recognized this for what it was. A desperate attempt to maintain the family dynamic, to drag me back into the role of scapegoat. Instead of giving in to fear, I went directly to Veronica's office. Do you have a minute? I asked from her doorway. Of course. What's up? I closed the door behind me and took a deep breath. I need to tell you something about why I left Portland. For the next half hour, I explained the situation with my family, the business failure, my father's legal troubles, and Rachel's implied threat to contact Veronica with some unspecified accusations. When I finished, Veronica leaned back in her chair. Thank you for telling me this. It can't have been easy. I don't want there to be any surprises, I said. If my sister does contact you— Melissa, Veronica interrupted gently. Your work speaks for itself. Nothing your sister might say could change what I already know about you as a professional. She smiled. Besides, anyone who would threaten to sabotage their own sister's career isn't exactly a credible source, is she? The relief was so intense I had to blink back tears. No, I suppose not. Family complications are complicated, Veronica said, but they're also private. As far as I'm concerned, your decision to relocate was a professional one that's benefited our Seattle office. The rest is your business. As I left her office, I felt a weight lifting. One more victory to add to the stack, as Jessica would say. One more choice to prioritize my well-being over toxic family dynamics. That evening, I received a final text on my new number. forwarded from the old one I'd now permanently disconnected. This isn't over. No signature, but the Portland area code made the sender clear. I looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. In a way, Rachel was right. It wasn't over, not entirely. There would likely be legal and financial complications to navigate related to the co-signed loan. There might be more attempts to contact me, to pull me back in, but something fundamental had shifted. My family no longer had the power to define me, to assign blame, to determine my worth. That chapter, of my life at least, was indeed over, and for the first time I was truly okay with that. 6 months after leaving Portland, Seattle had become home in ways I never anticipated. My apartment now reflected my personality, with pottery pieces I'd made displayed alongside books I genuinely wanted to read, rather than those that would impress others. I'd adopted a rescue cat, a one-eyed tabby named Milo, who greeted me each evening with unconditional affection. My circle of friends had expanded beyond Sophia and Diana to include fellow volunteers from the animal shelter, members of a hiking group, and colleagues from the now thriving Seattle office. I'd found my rhythm, my voice, my peace. The legal aftermath of my father's actions had played out largely without my direct involvement. Through my lawyer, I'd provided documents and statements establishing that I'd been misled about the business's financial situation when co-signing the loan. I'd agreed to a partial repayment plan that stretched my budget, but was manageable. The bank had been surprisingly understanding once they reviewed the evidence of my father's deception. I hadn't responded to any further direct communications from my family members until a particular email arrived from my mother. "I'm coming to Seattle next weekend for a medical consultation. Would you consider meeting for coffee? Just me, no expectations." After discussing it with Dr. Miles, I agreed to a 30-minute meeting at a cafe near Pike Place Market Neutral territory, where I could easily leave if necessary. I arrived early, selecting a table with a clear path to the exit, my therapist's strategies for managing anxiety firmly in mind. When my mother walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked years older, thin and gray, with none of the carefully maintained appearance she'd always prioritized. She spotted me and hesitated, as if unsure of her welcome. I didn't stand to hug her, but I nodded at the empty chair across from me. "Hello, Mom." "Melissa," she said, her voice catching slightly as she sat down. "You look well." "Thank you. I am well." An awkward silence followed as she ordered a tea and fidgeted with her napkin. I waited, determined not to fill the space with nervous chatter or apologies as I once would have. Finally, she spoke. "Your father was sentenced last month. 2 years, mostly probation. The business is gone, of course. We had to sell the house to pay off the remaining debts." "I heard," I said neutrally. My lawyer had kept me informed of developments relevant to my financial liability. "We're living in an apartment now. It's smaller than what we're used to." "I'm sorry things have been difficult," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no joy in my parents' downfall. She looked at me searchingly. "You really are, aren't you?" "Sorry, even after how we treated you." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "I don't understand you, Melissa. I never have. You were always so different from the rest of us. So sensitive, so determined, so willing to take the blame even when it wasn't yours to take." She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. "Until you weren't. People can only bend so far before they break," I replied quietly. "Or before they stand up straight. Is that what you did? Stand up straight?" "Eventually." Another silence, but less tense this time. "I wanted to blame you when you left," she admitted. "It was easier than facing the truth about your father, about the business, about my own part in it all." I blinked in surprise. This acknowledgement, however small, was unprecedented. Rachel still blames you, she continued. Tyler, too, somewhat. It's easier than accepting that our family had problems long before the business failed. And you? I asked, holding my breath. She looked down at her tea. I've had a lot of time to think. Too much time, maybe. And I've realized that we did to you what my family did to me. I was the difficult one, the too sensitive one, the one who couldn't take a joke. She met my eyes briefly before looking away again. I promised myself I'd never do that to my children, but somehow we fell into the same pattern. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more self-awareness than I'd ever witnessed from her. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, she admitted. That's up to you, I suppose. I didn't come here with expectations. I just needed to see that you're okay. I am okay, I confirmed. Better than okay, actually. I can see that. A faint smile crossed her face. You have a light about you that wasn't there before. In Portland, you always seemed dimmed, somehow. We talked a little longer, carefully avoiding certain topics, gradually finding our way to a conversation that felt, if not comfortable, at least not actively painful. When our agreed-upon 30 minutes were up, I signaled for the check. Would you... She hesitated. Would you be open to talking again sometime? Maybe phone calls to start? I considered this. I'd be open to occasional calls, I said carefully. But I need you to understand something. I'm building a life here that's healthy for me. I can't go back to the family dynamic we had before. I understand, she said, though I wasn't sure she truly did. Limited contact is better than none. We parted with an awkward, brief hug, neither of us quite sure how to navigate this new territory. Over the following months, we established a cautious pattern of communication, short phone calls every few weeks, neutral topics at first, gradually expanding to include more personal subjects as trust slowly rebuilt. She never pushed for more than I was willing to give, which itself represented a significant change. My father, in contrast, remained unapologetic. When he finally called, 6 months into his probation, his version of reconciliation involved suggesting I return to Portland to help rebuild the family name through a new business venture he was considering. I don't think that would be healthy for either of us, Dad, I said gently. Still holding grudges, I see, he replied bitterly. I thought you were the forgiving one in the family. Forgiveness doesn't mean putting myself back in a harmful situation, I explained, recalling Dr. Miles's exact words on the subject. I can forgive you and still maintain my boundaries. He scoffed. Boundaries. That's therapist talk. Yes, it is, I acknowledged. And therapy has helped me understand a lot about our family dynamics. So now I'm some psychology case study? Perfect. More blame. I recognize the old pattern trying to reassert itself and refuse to engage. I'm not blaming you, Dad. I'm just saying I've found a healthy path forward for myself, and I need to stay on it. The call ended poorly, but I felt stronger for having maintained my position without being drawn into the familiar cycle of accusation and defense. Tyler remained distant, occasionally included in group texts from our mother, but never initiating contact himself. Rachel, true to form, vacillated between angry messages and tearful pleas, neither of which I engaged with beyond brief acknowledgments. The most unexpected development came during a weekend hiking trip with my now close friend Jessica and some others from our poetry slam group. We were resting at an overlook, admiring the view of Mount Rainier, when Jessica mentioned her younger brother was moving to Seattle. He's going through a rough time, she explained. His roommates basically turned him into their personal servant and blame him for everything that goes wrong in the apartment. The description was so familiar I felt a jolt of recognition. Classic scapegoating, I said without thinking. Exactly. I told him he needs to get out of there, but he keeps making excuses about loyalty and friendship. She looked at me thoughtfully. Would you maybe talk to him when he visits next weekend? You're the only person I know who really understands what it's like to extract yourself from that kind of situation. The request caught me off guard. My journey was still ongoing, my healing incomplete. Who was I to advise someone else? I'm not an expert, I demurred. You're the most expert person I know on this specific topic, Jessica insisted. Just coffee, no pressure. But I think hearing from someone who's been there could really help him. So, the following weekend, I found myself across a cafe table from Jessica's brother, Michael, a soft-spoken young man who reminded me painfully of myself 2 years earlier. He described situations that echoed my own experiences, the same patterns of blame and emotional manipulation, the same erosion of self-worth. I know I should probably move out, he concluded, but they're my friends. We've been through a lot together, and maybe I am too sensitive, you know? Maybe I do need to try harder. I recognize the self-doubt, the internalized blame. Can I share something I've learned the hard way? I asked. He nodded. Relationships should make you feel valued, not diminished. They should be reciprocal, not one-sided. And most importantly, when someone shows you who they are through consistent behavior, believe them the first time. But what if it's my fault? He asked, the familiar question that had kept me trapped for years. Even if you have things to work on, which we all do, that doesn't justify being treated as the universal scapegoat, I explained. Real friends, real family, help you grow. They don't tear you down to build themselves up. We talked for over 2 hours, well beyond our planned meeting time. By the end, he wasn't ready to make any decisions, but he had questions, perspective, and resources I wished I'd had when facing my own situation. As I walked home afterward, I felt a profound sense of purpose. My painful experience, rather than being simply something to overcome, had given me insight that could potentially help others. The scapegoat's journey, typically a solitary one, could perhaps be a little less lonely if those of us who had walked it shared our maps. This realization became a turning point in my healing process. I began volunteering with a support group for adults from dysfunctional families, eventually facilitating sessions that provided the validation and strategies I'd had to discover on my own. A year after leaving Portland, I stood on the Seattle waterfront watching ferries cross the Sound, reflecting on how far I'd come. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, it probably never would, but it no longer defined me. I'd built a life filled with genuine connections, meaningful work, and hard-earned wisdom. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Thinking of you today. Hope you're well. Simple. No demands, no guilt. A small sign of progress. I typed back, I am. Thank you. Hope you are too. Standing there, watching the water reflect the afternoon sun, I understood that healing isn't about perfect resolution or dramatic reconciliation. It's about finding peace within yourself, establishing healthy boundaries, and recognizing that while you can't change your past or control others' behavior, you can choose your own path forward. Family healing is possible, but it requires everyone's effort, not just the sacrifice of the scapegoat. Some relationships may transform and grow. Others may need to remain distant for your well-being. Both outcomes can be part of a healthy life. As someone who lived the painful journey from family scapegoat to self-liberation, I want to ask, have you ever had to walk away from a relationship that continuously diminished you? How did you find the strength to choose yourself? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear they're not alone in their struggle. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it.